Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Jaya Tirumuradari, Jaya Tirumuradari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha, Jaya Tirumuradari, Jaya Tirumuradari. Jaya Yashodanandana, Jaya Braja Janaranjana, Jaya Braja Janaranjana, Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Kunja Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Variparajacharya Sutta Sutta Sisima of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Melitangina Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisance unto him. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Today we're starting a new chapter, and it's chapter 84, the sage's teachings at Kurukshetra. It's Canto 10, and we'll do text 1. But before that, there's a synopsis, so we have a summary here that we're looking at. This chapter describes the arrival of great sages at Kurukshetra to observe the auspicious occasion of a solar eclipse, the sage's glorification of Lord Krishna, and Vasudev's enthusiastic performance of sacrifices. On the occasion of a solar eclipse at Kurukshetra, exalted ladies like Kunti, Draupadi, and Subhadra got the chance to associate with Lord Krishna's queens. Seeing how much the Lord's consorts loved their husband, the ladies were struck with wonder. As the women talked among themselves, and the men did likewise, great sages headed by Narada, Narada means hell, headed by Narada and Vyasadeva arrived there, desiring to see Lord Krishna. The various kings and other leading personalities who were sitting at their leisure, including the Pandavas, Krishna, and Balaram, stood up as soon as they saw the sages. The leaders all bowed down to the great souls, inquired about their well-being, and worshiped them by offering them sitting places, water, and so on. Lord Krishna then said, "Now our lives are successful, for we have obtained the goal of life. The audience of great sages and yoga masters, which even demigods only rarely obtain. The water at a holy place of pilgrimage and the deity forms of the gods can purify one only after a long time. But saintly sages purify just by being seen. Those who identify themselves with their bodies and neglect to honor transcendental sages like you are no better than asses." Okay. After hearing Lord Krishna speak these words in the mood of a mere mortal, the sages remained calm, silent for some time, bewildered. Then they said, "How amazing our Lord is. He covers his true identity with human-like activities and pretends to be subject to superior control. Surely he has spoken in this way only to enlighten the general populace. Such behavior of his is indeed inconceivable." The sages continued to glorify the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul, and the friend and worshipper of the Brahmins. After the sages had praised him, Lord Krishna offered them his obeisance, and they begged his permission to return to their hermitages. But just then, Vasudeva came forward, bowed to the sages, and asked, "What activities can one perform to be free from the bondage of fruit of work?" The sages replied, "By worshipping the Supreme Lord Hari through the performance of Vedic sacrifices, you will become free from the bondage of fruit of work." Vasudeva then requested the sages to act as his priests, and he arranged for Vedic sacrifices to be performed with super excellent paraphernalia. Afterward, Vasudeva presented the priests with valuable gifts of cows and jewelry, and also with marriageable Brahmin girls. He then performed the ritual bath, marking the end of the sacrifice, and fed every one sumptuously, even the village dogs. Next, he gave ample gifts to his relatives, the various kings and others, who all took Sri Krishna's leave and returned to their own homes. Unable to depart because of his intense affection for his relatives, Nanda Maharaj remained at Kurukshetra for 3 months, reverenced by the Yadavas. On one occasion, Vasudeva began to describe the deep friendship Nanda had shown him, shedding tears openly. At the end of 3 months, Nanda left for Mathura with the fond farewells of all the Yadavas. When the Yadavas finally saw that the rainy season was about to begin, they returned to Dwarka, where they related all that had happened at Kurukshetra to the residents of their capital. Hare Krishna. End of the summary. Okay, text 1. Shri Shuka Uvacha Shrutva Prita Subala Putri Ata Yagyasena. I see. Yagyaseni. Oh, so yeah, that is supposed to be a long I at that end. Yagyaseni. Okay. Madhava. Madhavi. Ata. Kshiptipa. Patnya. Uta. Swa. Gopyaha. Krishne Kilatmani Harao Pranayanu Bandhan Sarva Visismur Alam Ashru Kalakulakshaha. Great language, I mean, you really have to use your tongue. Shri Sugovacha Shrutva Prita Subala Putra Ata Yagyasini Prita Subala Putra Ta Yagyasini Madhavyata Shitipa Patnya Uta Swagopyaha. Krishne Kilatmani Harao Pranayanupannam.
Krishne Kilatmani Harao Pranayanupannam.
Sarva Visismur Alam Ashru Kala Kulakshaha.
Sarva Visismur Alam Ashru Kala Kulakshaha.
Shri Shuka Uvacha. Everyone can take a line.
Shrutva Shrutva Prita Subala Putrata Yagnaseni.
Shrutva Prita Subala Putriata Yagnaseni.
Madhva Ata Karikvara Patamaya Savagopiyaya.
Madhavyata Shipriya Patnya Utta Swagopya. Krishne Kilatmani Haro Pranayanupandam. Sarva Visismur Alam Ashru Kalakulakshaha. Shri Shuka Uvacha. Shukadeva Goswami said, Shrutva, hearing, Prita, Kunti, Subalapatri, Putri, Gandhari, the daughter of King Subal, Ata, and Yagyasini, Draupadi, Madhavi, Subhadra, Ata, and Shitipa of the kings, Patnyaha, the wives, Uta, also, Swa, Lord Krishna's own, Gopyaha, gopis, Krishne to Krishna, Akila, of all. Atmani, the soul. Harau, the Supreme Lord Hari. Pranaya, loving. Anubandham, attachment. Sarva, all of them. Visismyu, became amazed. Alam, greatly. Ashrukala, with tears. Akula, filling. Akshaha, whose eyes. Translation. Shukadeva Goswami said, Prita, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, the wives of other kings and the Lord's coward girlfriends, were all amazed to hear of the queen's deep love for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and soul of all beings, and their eyes filled with tears. Shukadeva Goswami said, Prita, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, the wives of other kings, and the Lord's coward girlfriends, were all amazed to hear of the Queen's deep love for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and soul of all beings, and their eyes filled with tears. Purport by Srila Prabhupada's followers. Draupadi is the chief hearer in this assembly of exalted women, since, as explained by Srila Sridhar Swami, she had asked the question that Lord Krishna's queens answered by relating their respective stories. Since Gandhari and the other ladies named here were not even mentioned in the previous chapter as having been present, Acharya Sridhar concludes that they must have heard the Queen's narrations only secondhand. Indeed, Draupadi would never have spoken so freely in the presence of Prita and Gandhari, her elders, or before the gopis, whose attitude toward the queens of Dwarka was not particularly sympathetic. Even though the queens of Dwarka his attitude toward the Queen of Dwarka was not particularly sympathetic. Even though the gopis joined in shedding tears, it was more because of their being reminded of Shri Krishna's pastimes than because of any loving affinity between them and the queens. We should remember, of course, that there is always perfect harmony on the spiritual platform. Apparent conflict between pure devotees is nothing like mundane envy and strife. The jealousy of the gopis was more show than substance, being exhibited by them as an ecstatic symptom of their overflowing love for Krishna. Srila Sridhar Swami Pad further analyzes the phrase Swagopyaha as implying that these gopis were the queen's swarup, the original prototypes of whom the queens were specific expansions. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Pranamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pricharini Veera Vishesha Shridyavali Paschachari Shatarine. Hare Krishna. God. Okay, first verse from a new chapter. We're starting kind of fresh, but in another way we are not. This is a continuity of the story to do with many, many devotees, bhakti yogis, Vaishnavas, and Vaishnavis going to Kurukshetra to observe a solar eclipse, and then while there having many sacrifices and probably hearing from the sages. So it's a big event. It's, everybody's coming together. It's a big party. Big party. Just keep it very vivid. It's vivid in my mind. This when I was walking near Ottawa, and there was a big trail of Canada geese that walked across this two-lane highway, and they just took their time. And a guy who was on his way to work. It was a nice early morning, and he sort of, after the crossing of the geese, he came close to me. He was moving slowly towards me. He said, "Looks like they're really having a party." So a party means when entities come together, they have a good time, especially human beings. And human beings are having a good time, but it's meaningful because they're going for purification. Sacrifice means purification. Hearing from sadhus who are speaking about the Absolute is also about purification. And even though it's very casual, the queens talking about Krishna, and we're talking about 8 major queens here, with Draupadi hearing from them, that was also very purifying. From the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is how does it go? Tesham evanakaram. No, that's not it. I'm thinking of 10, 9. Tesham, what is it? No, it's not that either. I'll get it. I trusted Bhagavad Gita with me. And we're just around the corner. Yes, 10, 9. Matschita, Madgata Prana, Bodhyanta Parasparam, Katyantas Shaman Nityan, Tushanti Cha Ramanti Cha. Thanks. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. They derive great satisfaction. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So the key words here, the phrase here in this verse is conversing about me. So where there's conversation about Krishna, there's going to be joy, tushanti, joy, pleasure, and ramanti. We say Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One way to look at this part of the Maha Mantra is that there's pleasure. The pleasure of Krishna, that the Rama can, the pleasure of Krishna, which is Radha. So it's keywords Rama. You go, the whole word isn't there, but if you go to the park over there, when I called yesterday, you were in the park, right? Ram's Den. The den of Ram. An important verse from Bhagavad Gita 10:9. And what is being practiced, what Krishna talks about by devotees, is being practiced here at Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra is a bit north. It would be quite a bit of a journey to go from Vrindavan up to Kurukshetra. I'm not sure how many days in those days, but it takes a little time if you're on a train or something like that, or a bus. I went with Dharma. Didn't you come with me to Kurukshetra?
I think so, no.
No, but I did go to Kurukshetra, about 3 times, And I went to the Haridwar, we took the bus up there. You and I took the bus, I remember. And so what happens, like at the Kumbh Mela, largest collection of human beings on the planet, is the Kumbh. Millions of people go, millions of people. I remember the last time they had a big one, quite a few movie stars went, that Richard Gere guy, it was in the newspapers. A lot of people were going there. The people are into spirituality, the Eastern thing. They went and to participate in this and to try to take a bath. The problem with the Kumbh Mela is everyone tries to take a bath at the same time. And even though the Ganga River is quite extensive and quite wide, it does have its limitations, and people do get caught up in a kind of a frenzy. They do. Sometimes people die too. Some of the older folks get crushed. And I could see it. When we had our anniversary of the deity installation at Mayapur, one of our ladies who was from Australia that was in our play, she went for darshan before she came to our practice, and she was crying. I said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Well, they just walked all over me." So there was just crowds, madness, thickness of people, congestion, and a little bit of a frenzy, and not, let's say, keeping one's cool, going in a queue and things like that. It was like everyone, a lot of pushing, a lot of shoving, love shoves, you might call it like that, for lack of a better word, maybe. So the important thing about these events, it's not always the sacrifices. It's really more about that sages are there, and it was indicated here, to see them purifies. You get cleansed just by seeing saintly people. What to speak of when they open their mouth and they're talking of the Absolute. That is the real thing, not Shastras, Bhagavatam. It's not so much that you go to bathe in the Ganga. What's more important is that there are people there. They're speaking of the absolute truth. It's what goes in the ears that is more important than the water that you take in at the Ganga. I mean, taking a bath in the Ganga is like a ritual, but more important than a ritual, especially in this day and age, is to hear Shravan, engage in Shravanam and Kirtanam, the two paths that are expressed by Prahlad Maharaj so eloquently to his father. His father asked him, "What did you learn in school, Prahlad?" He had him on his lap. He said, "I didn't learn anything. Not from my teachers. But I learned from somewhere else. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Arjanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyamatma Nivedanam." And that means that hearing and chanting about Vishnu, and Hiranyakashipu didn't like that word at all. If Prahlad said Hiranyakashipu, if he said Shravanam, Kirtanam, Hiranyakashipuanam, then it would have been okay. But it wasn't that. It's not what he heard. He heard Vishnu, and that raised the ire of Hiranyakashipu. But Prahlad hit it on the nail, on the head, the nail. He got it right. He was straight about it, straight shooter. He was talking about, we have to hear of the pastimes of the Lord. And that's why we have our Krishna book reading at night to wrap up and kind of before we do our pot banging and everything. We go to hear because it's auspicious to do so, because it's purifying to the ears. And we're having a good time together. We come together, we bond together, and hear about the pastimes of the Lord, which are all auspicious. Yes. And so we have the sages at Naimisharanya. They all come together from all over the world, and devatas from all over the cosmos. They all come and they engage in a sacrifice, engage in a 1,000-year sacrifice. But what's more important again than the rituals, it's hearing from those sages what they have to say. Shukadeva Goswami is speaking. Everybody's coming over there. And they didn't come here just to see a young sadhu who's naked. It wasn't about that. It was about what did he have to say? What was he saying? And what was he saying? He was saying this. 7 days it took to go through this. Bhagavat Saptaha, we call it. Bhagavat. This is the Bhagavat. Saptaha. Sapta refers to 7. 7 days. And does anybody remember another pastime where things went on for 7 days and 7 nights? Does anybody remember? 7 days and 7 nights. I'll give you a hint. What's this? What's this?
lifting over downhill.
Yes, thank you very much, Dakshin. Lifting over downhill. And so the rain came down for 7 days and 7 nights. As far as we know, there wasn't a Bhagavatam class that happened at that time. It could have. And everyone sort of, like, it was a lockdown period. Everyone was locked down. Couldn't go anywhere. People had to all stay there. And, but they did see Krishna. So that's the main point. Bhagavatam, Krishna, there's no difference. There isn't a difference. I mean, the Bhagavatam it's Shastra about Krishna and his various features. The different avatars that are mentioned. There's over 20 of them. There's 10 subject matters within the Bhagavatam. But it all is connected to Krishna in the end. It's all linked up with him. There's no existence without him. So that Bhagavatam is recited like for that time. That's all the time that there was. What was significant about the 7 days? Why 7? Why 7 days, Dharma Prana? 7 days. Anybody?
7 is an auspicious number.
Okay. What else? What was supposed to happen at the end of the 7th day? That's right. Yeah. Parikshit. Maharaj was supposed to perish. He only had 7 days to live. And in that 7 days, he had a choice. In that 7 days, he decided to hear from the great sage, Shukadeva Goswami. And Shukadeva Goswami is highly qualified. I'm not qualified. I don't even know why I'm up here. You know. But we're just repeating what was said to the best of our ability. Shukadeva Goswami was qualified because the same point we're going to make. Why was he so qualified? Can anybody say? To speak the Bhagavatam. Well, another question related. Why was he in the womb of his mother for so long? I'll ask another question. How long was he there for? Yeah. Does anybody know? Getting there. 16. Yeah. Many songs have been written in the 50s about